So, with that, we're going to start episode 008 of the Social Capital Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, Mr. Shawn Elliott. He was president of the ultra luxury division of Nest Seekers. Mr. Elliott, thank you so much for making it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. And a special shout out to a buddy of ours, Carl DeVito, for making this happen, putting us together.
Yeah, Carl is absolutely the best of the best, and he's a guy who wears many hats. But at the end of the day, he performs at a high level of excellence. We love Carl.
Sure, sure. And with the title of being president, right, of this ultra luxury division internationally, kind of take me through, Sean, where you started and kind of how you got to where you are today. Where are the roots of Sean Elliott?
So let's go from the beginning. When I graduated college back in the '80s, went backpacking like a lot of kids do through Europe, and growing up in a family of retailers, I found a brand that really didn't have representation in the United States. It was called United Colors of Benetton. You're probably too young to even know the brand, but when the brand was at its peak, we had 7,000 stores worldwide. I owned 14 of them. I went from zero to hero in my 20s, super successful. The brand, like a lot of brands, they need to be nurtured. Unfortunately, this designer didn't do that, and by the early 2000s, it started to fizzle out. So it was really interesting how I went from zero to hero and then back down to zero. But we opened a lot of stores, made a lot of friends, developed a lot of relationships. And when I was exiting from my retail stores, what I found was some of my leases that I had negotiated were very under market value, meaning that if market value was $200 a square foot on my store on Broadway and Astor Place. Um, I was paying 100 a foot. So to do the math, if I had a 3,000 square foot store, and that is $300,000 a year, was what I was paying, 100 a foot, $25,000 a month. Market value was $600,000, 200 a foot, 3,000 feet, $600,000 or 50,000 a month. So one day the landlord called me and knew that the brand was fizzling a little bit. There was also some other technicalities like shoplifting, and no different from what you see today
Yeah.
with guys in L.A., Miami, New York running into a store, running out with merchandise. This was going on back in the '90s. So I started to see the writing on the wall, started to pivot, realized some of my leases were very valuable, had an amazing offer from that particular landlord, and and exited from the fashion business, and for 5 minutes went into the commercial real estate business, because the leasing was my kind of gig. Only to find out that the residential real estate business is like swimming with dolphins, yet the commercial real estate business was like swimming with sharks. Everyone's a shark. Everyone's a bright guy. Everyone has a good education. Why compete with those guys when you can compete with the dolphins, right?
Sure.
So got my license, went to work at Douglas Elliman, actually right across the street. And within 6 months, I was their number one producer within the region. And this is 22 years ago. I enjoyed it. I knew nothing about selling real estate. I knew a lot about selling sweaters, but
Hmm.
nothing about real estate. But, they say fake it till you make it, dress to impress, and, learn the inventory.
Hmm.
And I certainly did. I attended every broker open house, every public open house. I knew this region, I knew this area better than anyone, and put together, 20 years of, we'll say, high level retail, um, being very strategic, and building a huge business into real estate as just a single real estate agent. And then, believe it or not, I opened my first office in Woodbury, Long Island, which is about 10 minutes from here. Second office, I ended up buying the company across the street from me, called Frost Pond Realty. And then I bought the company next door to that. There's like real estate row over here across the
Hmm.
street. There's like seven realtors from Douglas Elliman to Compass to Laffey to Berkshire Hathaway, to Christie's. It's like real estate row. And one by one opened up multiple offices. And then came 2008, which was like a little, I'd say, knocked some wind out of my sails and a
Hmm.
lot of other people. But we consolidated, we got through it. And then in 2013, I got an offer to sell my company, turned it down. But meanwhile, while this is all going on step by step, we are really eating market share like Pac-Man
Mhm.
in the luxury market. Now, there's a difference between the luxury market and the ultra luxury market. The luxury market is basically at that time, and we'll go back 10 years ago, we're talking about anywhere from 3 million to probably 15 million. That was considered luxury. And there really is no, with the exception of the Hamptons here on the Gold Coast of Long Island, there is no ultra luxury. Didn't exist. But hence, we would just eat everybody's lunch. I mean, this is like my favorite thing to do. We would eat Christie's lunch on a daily basis. We would eat Sotheby's lunch on a
Sure,
daily
sure.
basis. Like this was our jam, you know. And we just did it better. And at the end of the day, we put our money where our mouth was. We spent more money per household marketing your home than any other firm. And I think at the end of the day, it's the agent that puts in the time, the most strategic, as well as the biggest investment into the property that gets the fastest return, meaning gets the house sold for the most money in the least amount of time with the absolute best terms.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to unpack there. I would say that it sounds to me like there was such a common bond between your ability to sell, promote, and offer luxury and designer clothing that spoke to the same customer that appreciates the 15 plus $1 million home.
Yeah, I would say that is definitely getting in, being in fashion is very competitive as well. Being in retail is very difficult. It's a lot harder to be in retail than it is in wholesale. Wholesale, you work Monday through Friday. Retail, you work 7 days like real estate. And it's relationship driven as well. But you need agents. I'm sorry, you need customers to cross the threshold when you're in retail. You can open up stores in shopping malls. You can open up stores anywhere. But if you don't get customers in the stores, you're not going to do any business. So back then, we were pretty sophisticated. Didn't have what was really called email back in the
Mhm,
day, and they didn't really have databases or drip campaigns or CRMs or anything
mhm.
quite like that. But we had a strong postcard campaign. Any person who ever came into one of our stores, we took their name, we took their telephone number, and eventually we took their email address. So we were very, very organized, and that we can reach out to them when we had a sale, we had markdowns, we had new inventory, when there was a midnight sale, and we did all of that. And as a result, we were very successful. We turned out to be in the Benetton business. We were the number one retail group within Benetton with 14 stores per square foot than anyone else in the US, Canada, or Mexico. So at 20 something years old, here I am in my early 30s now. And, we're just tearing it up.
Mhm.
And we're speaking at everyone's conference, and I'm speaking in front of every owner, licensee, management, and basically in my 20s and early 30s, teaching them how to run their stores. And I loved every minute of it. Hence, fast forward into real estate, 2013, 14, 15. Again, we're eating all this inventory. And then Eddie Shapiro of Nest Seekers approached me, like other companies who, wanted to be not only in New York City, but the Hamptons, they wanted to be in between. So there are plenty of companies like Brown Harris Stevens that are in Manhattan and they're in the Hamptons, but they have no presence in the middle.
Mhm.
Same thing with Corcoran, again, New York City, the Hamptons with nothing in the middle. And I was approached by some of them, but the best fit was clearly Nest Seekers. They had the platform I wanted in order to be a global agent and a super luxury agent. And back to the title where this all started, the president of the ultra luxury division. And that kind of sets me up or sets it just sets the tone for what's here, what's happened over the last 6 years, and what's going to happen over the next 25.
What an exciting previous 20 years, to say the least. I'm super interested to get to know how you went from retail to obviously ultra luxury here on Long Island, Gold Coast, Hampton, New York City. How did you take that business? And a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs, especially that are in the real estate game, whether they're mortgage, real estate agents. Take me through how you went from essentially Long Island, New York focused or centric to how you grew to Miami and ultimately international?
Great question. So the way I look at it is you can't be mercy of one market. And the way I learned that was in fashion. So Benetton was a brand, let's make it up like J. Crew or Banana Republic. J. Crew basically has 4 seasons like we all do: spring, summer, winter, and fall. And yet Benetton, the same thing, but we would buy our merchandise 6 months or a year in
Mhm,
advance. And if Benetton, the designer, came up with a bad collection, okay, and you had to live with that collection for that next season, you were at the mercy of that collection. So essentially, I never wanted to be in one place at one time or have only one vendor.
mhm,
So real estate's simple. Right now, this is one place. We're in the Gold Coast of Long Island. What does that mean? Brookville, Old Westbury, Muttontown. We're talking about Woodbury, Locust Valley, Mill Neck, Center Island. It's the Gold Coast of Long Island. That's great. We conquered that market
Mhm.
share. We certainly had the highest market share in selling the most expensive homes in this neighborhood. And I'm not going to say I love every minute of that, but at some point when you win, you need something else, right? To get your heart pumping and going. Like
Mhm.
you need something else. So that became, I'm like, let me get into Florida. And I got my license in Florida 10 years ago. And Florida was very different 10 years ago than it was today. But I'm happy I still hold that real estate license because I wanted to diversify. I knew a lot of people as they get a little bit older were moving from New York to Florida, and I wanted to be part of that.
Sure.
And, you know, there are people from Florida that will also move to New York, and why not have licenses in both of those markets? And then in 2016, 2017, I got an opportunity to sell the most expensive house. It's actually this one right here on this TV, ever built, most expensive spec house ever built in the history of the United States. 924 Bel Air Road, also known as Billionaire.
Mhm.
Um, Price tag $250 million for this 38,000 square foot mega mansion right in the heart of Bel Air on the 50-yard line with incredible views. That was my lead into California. I was hired as a consultant. I didn't have a real estate license in the state of California. I was paid on a monthly basis to run a team, a world class team of agents who were top producers
Mhm.
in California. I was the one who held them accountable so that, you know, my client made a huge investment to build a $250 million spec house,
Sure.
and he wanted to make sure that that investment was being handled properly. So because I sold his house here in New York for 40% more than it was worth, the house was worth $7 million maximum. I got the guy $11 million, not only to represent him, the seller in the transaction, I also brought the buyer in the transaction. And this is a side note, but you'll love it because the way we got this client is, so I saw a trend, and I'm sorry, you know, we're going all over the place, but
Please, please, please.
I saw a trend in New York, and I started seeing it in places like Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Vancouver, Canada, New York City, Long Island, of very wealthy, high net worth Chinese moving from mainland China, places like Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Beijing, Shanghai, to the United States and bringing their children because of the education. And when I saw that trend in 2011, instead of waiting for the Chinese to come to me, I got on a plane and went to mainland China.
Mhm.
And hence, between 2011 and 2018, in that 7 year period of time, I was in China 12 times.
Wow.
So,
Came familiar.
yeah, so now I get this opportunity to represent the guy who built that crazy house. Um, but before he built it, to represent him in this $15 million house right here in Upper Brookville, 1 mile from
Mhm.
here. So I had a high, I knew it was a high likelihood that it would be a Chinese buyer. So that trip I went to China seeking for that whale. And I went to Shanghai and I went to Beijing. And I wined and dined a lot of like uber rich Chinese guys that all call bosses and ultimately think I found our buyer. So after speaking, I was a keynote speaker at one of these Chinese
Mhm.
conventions. I don't speak Chinese, although I do speak a little Chinese now.
Mhm.
We actually, my son and I both have taken Chinese. We did it for 2 years
Makes
because
sense.
yeah, we had to, at least out of respect, you got to
Sure.
try to learn the language, right? Went to China, found this couple, insane. They flew back about a month later. Cathay Pacific is the most expensive airline, the most luxurious airline out of China. I'm sure they flew first class. And I was there at JFK with a driver picking them up in a Rolls Royce
Mhm.
Phantom, a $450,000 Rolls Royce with two boxes on the back seat from Tiffany's with keys inside them.
Mhm.
Hence, they are picked up by a driver. I'm waiting at the house for them. The house was on 5 acres, gated. And here's where the marketing gets going and what I call merchandising a home. So there's all kinds of candy, right? There's eye candy. I have garage candy. There's bar candy. There's all types of candy. I had the car collection of the homeowner strategically placed in the driveway,
Mhm.
centered by a $2.5 million Bugatti.
Mhm.
On the right and left, two Aston Martins. On the right and left of that, two Ferraris. On the right and left of that, two more Rolls Royces. And when this guy pulled up in the Rolls Royce, and you don't know anything about, if you don't know anything about China, the Chinese have huge egos, but they can't express those egos in mainland China because of government. So they play it a little cool there. But when they come here, I
Or a
call them,
flaunt.
yeah, I call them ballers, and they get the ball. So I know what needs to be done. We merchandise that driveway. The gates opened up, and all I know is I had that guy at hello. He pulled up and saw all these cars, this incredible brick mansion, and I think he had known he was going to buy this house before he walked in. So, those are the things that we did differently from our competitors back in the day. The events that we threw as well. I'd love to share some of those with you. No one did that kind of world class. We published a magazine back in the day, which basically was a lifestyle magazine about luxury real estate from New York City to the Hamptons. And it was all about the best restaurants. Actually, we would pay homage to the best developers. It was the best interior design, all types of amazing real estate. And then just by chance, showcasing my top like 50 homes in my company. So it was everywhere it was cool to be. My magazine was at the Rolls Royce dealership, Ferrari dealership. It was in the Mercedes dealership, in every hot restaurant in Long Island, the Hamptons. And that was something interesting that we did as well. And then came 2017. Eddie was definitely the best fit for me for sure. Net Seekers has a platform to sell real estate like no one else. We're vertical, which means that we privately owned by Eddie
Mhm.
Shapiro. There's no partners, no debt. Unlike other companies who are like they're just drowning in debt. We're well financed, deep pockets, able to market your home and make the necessary spend in order to get the results. That was for me. Again, back to your what happened. So how I got into California. Eventually, one of the listing agents on that house wasn't performing on behalf of the client. My client didn't feel he was the right fit. He said, "Why don't you get your license in the state of
Mhm.
California, and I'm going to give you half of a $250 million listing." And I did. And I got the license, and then I became broker of record for my California office. And then I got listings in Malibu, Montecito, Bel Air, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood. I built a really nice practice in Southern California.
Wow. I mean, hats off to you. What a career. What a career. And it seems to me, and I feel very much a similar way, is that, in a way you're kind of hunting, you're hunting for your work. You're going to China a dozen times to find that buyer, wine and dine keynote speak. And you're relentless. This pursuit of being relentless to
Yeah, that's
make the
like
deal.
on a scale from 1 to 10, that's a 2 on my relentless scale. I mean, I could tell you stories that'll knock your socks off, and I even have video to share with you later on. You could, so for example, now you're trying to sell the most expensive house in the world, right? $250 million. We all know that, if I put a house on the market here for $2 million, you have no idea who your buyer is going to be. When you put a house on the market for $250 million, you know who your buyer is.
Right.
You do.
Makes sense. Sure.
He's going to be a millionaire.
There's a handful of people as well, so you could specifically target and market to those people and cater to, like I was saying earlier, is like you're creating your space, you're creating the space that is the ultra luxury within the magazine, and the $4 million between the 7 and 11 is the Tiffany, the Rolls Royce, the strategy of the cars and the candy. There's no doubt that the perceived value is how you're getting that.
So I love this,
Right.
but now the house is back on the market 10 years later for 7 million. I
Wow.
sold it to him at 11 million. The Dow Jones is probably at 16,000 at that point. The Dow Jones today is hovering around 40,000. So there's been so much inflation and all
Mhm.
that, which is great. You want your house to be worth more, but I'm not saying there was anything really smoke and mirrors or whatever. But the truth of the matter is, they saw the value that I basically
Created.
created.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Wonderful. Like I said, what a career. Could you share with me a time in your career, Sean, where you almost had an aha moment? Where was your aha moment along the way that kind of really took you from? I mean, I would imagine it was the $250 million real estate play.
Yeah, that $250 million listing was an incredible opportunity, and I learned a lot about how to seek out the audience most suited to purchase a house like that.
Hmm.
And again, like we said, the audience is really limited. And I'd love to tell you about some of the relentlessness at some point. But I was like that was the aha moment for me, is really learning. No one's ever sold a house for, at that time, when this house went to market about 7 years ago, maybe there were three or four houses that ever sold north of $100 million at that time. The Spelling Mansion, I would say, with one of them, Hef's Mansion, um, those both traded around 104, 105 million. Those were the trophy sales, but there weren't a lot more. So now we're trying to, basically enter new territory, and you're talking about 250. So being strategic, having a very strategic client,
Mhm.
sitting down and go, we do know the audience because there's only 3,000 people in the world that
Right.
could afford to buy a $250 million house. Basically, you need to be a billionaire, right? And not just a guy who's got $1 billion and no liquidity. You need a guy who's a multi-billionaire. There are 3,000 billionaires in the world. 1,000 are what's called phantom, so nobody knows who they are. They're in Asia. They're in the
Mhm.
Middle East. Nobody
Mhm.
knows who they are. Then there are 2,000 that are notable. Of the 2,000 that are notable, right, 1,300 reside outside the U.S. and 700 reside in the U.S. So my client, having deep pockets, um, and thinking very much like nest seekers, again, putting our money where our mouth is he gave me a budget on marketing, a massive budget. And
Really interested in this, and kind of take me through your marketing play, and kind of the channels that that you sought out to find this person.
yeah, and if you saw the marketing materials, I'll show you that after this podcast, and you're more than welcome to film
Sure.
some of that stuff. You'll see the level. But the idea, again, was reaching out to that audience. So I spent 2 years and 2,000. No, I take that back. I spent 2 years and $200,000 of my clients' money building what I call the database of wealth, or the black book that I currently
Mhm.
have. And that's what I was able to do, is leverage knowing the names, telephone numbers, email addresses, and
Mhm.
cell phone numbers of the billionaire community, and be able to reach out to them directly and serve them up, 924 Bel Air Road.
Mhm.
It is a one of a kind property and a one of a kind opportunity. And I've brought more than 70 billionaires through that property. And ultimately we sold it. So it's basically one by one. Now we'll talk about the relentlessness.
Mhm.
As you said, it is, I guess, pretty relentless to send a car to pick up the client and, wine and dine them and have basically the house merchandised properly and all of that. But it's much more than that. So we originally thought that Mark Cuban was the buyer for 924 Bel Air Road, $250 million. Mark spends 12 weeks a year in California filming Shark Tank.
Mhm.
And if you ever saw the Entourage movie, I'm a huge
Sure.
Entourage fan.
Sure.
So do you remember when Turtle invested in that tequila company?
Sure.
What was it called? Evian?
Evian.
Yeah.
Evian. Right.
And he had a party in his backyard because it was a preview for Vince's new movie.
It was in that house.
It was, no, it wasn't at our house, but it was on the lawn of some very expensive, like $50-100 million house somewhere in Bel Air or Beverly Hills. And Mark Cuban was in the audience
He was there. Right.
watching this movie
Right.
about to go off. I
Mhm.
forgot the name of the movie. I wish you could remember it. Someone's got to know it.
Cuban was actually in the movie as well.
Correct.
Right. Right.
So,
Right.
so I'm thinking, Cuban's sitting there and watching the Entourage movie, and I'm saying to myself, he loves California. Look at this guy. He loves it, right? He has to be in California because Shark Tank films like twice a month.
Mhm.
And he's rich. He's a billionaire. Let's just say I think that Mark Cuban is let's say, my first target. So what do
Mhm.
I do? I fly to Dallas. I buy a $2,500 seat to a Mavericks game, a
Sure.
floor seat,
Mhm.
this close to Mark Cuban, where Mark Cuban sits on the floor of a Mavericks game. And I bring my marketing material, and each book weighs 15 pounds and it's $900 to create. So there are 44 home games in the NBA if you don't make the playoffs.
Mhm.
And the one home game I choose is the one home game
He wasn't
that
there.
Cuban, yeah, doesn't attend.
That was my next question. Did you buy the $2,500 ticket knowing he was there? So you didn't.
I mean, how do you know Mark's going to show up to a
Sure.
game or
You
not?
roll the dice, right?
That it could be his daughter's birthday, son's birthday. You don't
Sure.
know. So he's not there. And I'm a little disappointed. But you don't know Shawn Elliott that well. So what Shawn Elliott does is Shawn finds four of Mark's hottest cheerleaders, grabs them, has someone take a photo of me holding the material, and then my marketing director sends me over a photo. She marks up saying a little card to Mark with my driver's license to show Mark I'm not some lunatic.
Mhm.
So he knows exactly who I am, saying, Mark, my name is Shawn Elliott. I came all the way to Dallas to get 15 minutes of your time to introduce you to what is the most expensive house coming to market in the United States and the most incredible home you will ever see. I'll be in Dallas all weekend. I'd love 15 minutes of your time.
Mhm.
So I left that $900 book with the cheerleaders
Mhm.
and I left the stadium. No call, no nothing. Hence, the next morning I went to Mark Cuban's office, the Maverick office
Mhm.
in Dallas, brought another book, walked into reception. Is Mark here? No, Mark's not here. Okay, can I leave something for him? Once again, I leave the book and that little note and my driver's license attached. No phone call.
0 for 2 at this point.
I'm over to
Right.
it. Three strikes, you're out, right?
Sure, sure. Keep
So
going.
I keep going. What I do is I Google where Mark Cuban lives in Dallas. I went with another box to Mark's house on Halloween,
Mhm.
trick or treating,
Wow.
press the gates. I have video of all this. And his security guard comes to the door and I hand him the bag. And I said, can you please deliver this to Mark? Is Mark home? He says, yes, I'll make the delivery. Um, Fair enough. I said, my phone number's on the card. So if any reason Mark wants to invite me in or something to learn more about this property, all good. You know, four security guards, at Mark's house, all good. Um, as I'm driving away, the phone rings and it's Mark Cuban. He goes, I got your book at the stadium. I got your book at my office. And now I have a book. Who are you? You
Right.
know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
who are you? Like,
yeah.
you're relentless. And I said, yes, I am the guy who's going to sell you a $250 million house. And at the end of the day, he was so curious to see the home. But ultimately, he said to me, there's just no way in the world he would ever live in the state of California because of taxes.
Makes
The
sense.
taxes in Texas, where state income tax are zero.
Mhm.
If you live in Los Angeles, it's somewhere between 10%, and then you got the local and city
Mhm.
taxes up to 14%. And that's why you see so many people like Sylvester Stallone moved to Palm Beach recently
Mhm.
with his family.
Yeah.
Mark Cuban
Mhm.
never would move there. Mark Wahlberg sold also his house next to Stallone and moved to Nevada because
Mhm.
he's making a ton of money and he can save crazy. And recently, you read in the news, Jeff Bezos bought $270 worth of property and assembled this major compound in Crete. And he will save $600 million a year in taxes.
Mhm.
And he spent 270 for the property, and maybe he'll spend another 130 to build it. So for $400 million, his strategy is, you do that once and you save 600 million a year. Not bad to be Jeff Bezos.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, everything he's doing is strategic, and yeah, what a great story. What a great relentless pursuit of not stopping until at least you get an answer, whether that answer was yes or whether it was no. You were on a mission to find it, and ultimately the home was sold. When you're talking about obviously where you came from, where you are today, what are some of the traits that you look for in an aspiring real estate agent, or some of the must-haves that an agent in your mind has to possess in order to, whether they're on your team or whether they're looking to get into the game?
You got to be relentless. You got to be the type of agent that's just going to put in the work. If you don't put in the work, there's no way you're going to have the outcome. You can't do this part time. It's full time, and you got to uncover every single stone when you have a listing until you find that buyer. And you just can't hang a sign on the front lawn and put it on MLS and expect the house to sell. It doesn't work like that. You got to do the digging. You need to, at your best, you need to figure out who you think the potential buyer is going to be and basically target that audience. If you're wrong, you could pivot and go after another audience, but try to be laser focused on who you think the buyer is going to be and hit them as hard as you can. And I think that most agents today are lazy. I think that they don't want to do the work, and it's like everything else in life. If you don't put the effort in, you're not going to get the return.
Mhm. Well, there's something right about delayed gratification, and you need to be okay with that, right? It's like anything else, whether you're in real estate or whether you're in fitness. Running a mile on the treadmill isn't going to make you skinny, but it's the relentless pursuit of continuing to be constantly and consistently disciplined in that effort to ultimately achieve your goal. So it's certainly one of those things. And naturally, when you have a 7, 8, 9, potentially 10-figure property, it's going to take those character traits. What part of the country or what part of the planet do you think is the next rise as far as it being untapped? Where do you see a lot of money being spent right now?
I mean, it's been happening since COVID. I mean, COVID really changed the world in many ways, especially for real estate. It took people out of the cities and back in the suburbs.
Mhm.
It took people, yeah, out of like high dense communities and put them in more of a in rural areas. But also, it made a lot of places very hot, very fast. Florida being the number one destination nationwide during COVID. I mean, everyone from the Northeast, New England, really fled to Florida, not really realizing what Florida really was. And it was an experiment. We all grew up thinking that when you get old, you go to Florida to die.
Mhm.
But now people go to Florida to live.
Sure.
And, there's
Sure.
this rule if you want to take homestead and not pay state income tax, it's the 186 rule where you have to live there 186 days a year. And, people used to think like going there and living in Florida for 186 days a year was like prison. And it's brutal. I can't do that. Guess what? People left during COVID. The government there is incredible. DeSantis is incredible. He just passed something this week about, consequences and crime and recently squatters. In fact, yesterday, if you're held squatting, you're going to be arrested and you're going to not be let out in 24 hours. You're going to be in prison for squatting in someone's house. And he was saying today, well, New York, you should get off your ass as well as California. Like, no consequences, then people are going to squat everywhere. But Florida, for so many reasons, and I think DeSantis is, excuse me, I think DeSantis is definitely one of them. There's so many reasons to go there, not just the state income tax. If New York, Florida, California, I mean, New York and California, you've got the crime, you've got the homeless rate, you got all that. Sean Hannity is a perfect example. You follow Fox News and Sean Hannity, I mean, he recently declared that he was going to take residency in the free state as well as the sunshine
Mhm.
state of Florida, that he's had enough of the crime, enough of the homelessness, and enough of the taxes. And he's broadcasting from Palm Beach now out of his townhouse. Listen, that was the number one. Then you
Mhm.
get into places that were always great, but sleepers like Nashville. You know,
Yes,
Nashville.
exploding. Nashville's exploding.
And I hate to say it, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you could have bought an awesome
Mhm.
house for $500,000. And I'm
Mhm.
talking a house to be really proud of. Go to 600, you're talking about probably 5,000 square feet, three-car garage, a pool in a gated community. That same house that was 600,000 then is as high as 1.5 now.
Yeah.
Houses that were in Florida that were 800,000 or 2.5 now.
Mhm.
Things have doubled, they've tripled. And then you got Texas. And Texas is still, what you're saying is, what's the one place that still hasn't been completely like, oh wow, now everyone's going to Texas. It's Texas because, again, the tax structure there is way less, and people do love Texas. They do love the weather, and that's becoming a place that people are going to. And then finally, it's Arizona. It seemed far from New Yorkers to go to the West Coast, and it is Arizona. Scottsdale really took off tremendously, and I believe that there's still room there for growth.
It seems like, yeah, it seems like the policies from a government level are really kind of what's creating and dictating the value of the homes and also the peace of mind it gives the owners and investors. They know that when they buy in those states that the property value will be there. They're not worried about the problems that New York and California are facing. So, it's definitely one of those things that from a government related level, it gives peace of mind. When you look at Sean not only parts of the country, but parts of the country that have agents that are exploding. Are you seeing an influx in a population of agents that are growing in, for example, California, Florida, New York, things like that?
Not in California.
Okay.
I would say right off the cuff, California is not breeding agents because the numbers are down. I mean, obviously, because of supply and demand right now, there's tremendous demand with no supply. I mean, inventory really dictates the market. It's really a lot of real estate agents are getting discouraged
Hmm.
about the market because it's a game of supply and demand, and
Hmm.
right now the inventory levels are low and demand is high.
And the rates aren't so friendly,
And on top of the
right?
rates, but yet prices are being held very high, not necessarily in California, but everywhere else because there is no inventory. And you got to live somewhere. So people upsize, people downsize, and there's also stagnation. So, if you've got a great interest rate, as you know, and you're paying 2.5%, 3%, and rates today are closer to 7,
Mhm.
and you're in that house and you're making that payment and you do have a mortgage, like you're not moving. You're not going to trade up, you're not going to trade down because even if you try to make a lateral move, it'll cost you twice as much to live there. So why are you moving? And that's why there's no inventory. Rates will come down, hopefully sooner than expected. Obviously there was no rate cut by the Fed in March. The next time that they're going to meet will be in June, and then maybe a cut. I hope there is. If
Mhm.
not, it's September. But we're looking forward to a cut, hopefully 50 basis points in June, and that will also just propel the spring real estate market and maybe create a little movement within people that want to trade up or trade down.
Mhm. Talk to me, Sean, about where you came from in regards to how you got on all of these programs and related to real estate. You know, CNBC shows, any sort of Netflix related show. For those that don't know, Shawn Elliott is the face of so much of that makes up digital real estate.
So it's lucky, right? I mean, I'm a real estate agent, real estate broker. I own my own firm. I know the New York market, the Florida market, the California market, and now I'm getting into the international market in a heavy way.
Hmm.
But in the U.S., I've been very privileged to be on Selling Sunset,
Hmm.
which was, I was on season two, and I had like 5 or 6 episodes on season two, and that led to a lot of people, a lot of eyes on that show. It is one of the hottest shows on Netflix in the Netflix history, and season two was, I think, the number one show at the time. And then Real Housewives of Miami called me on Bravo, and I did 5 episodes with those guys, being a real estate agent again, because I'm good at being a real estate agent because that's what I do for
Hmm.
a living. And that led to Million Dollar Beach House, which led to selling the Hamptons and led back to selling Sunset again this season and back to season two, which came out about 6 weeks ago for selling the Hamptons. So, and then I'm constantly on CNBC, Fox, CBS, some other networks, just talking about what I do best and what I love the most. I mean, this is a business that I love every minute of every day.
Hmm.
I am uber passionate about it, and I don't consider it work. So, the fact that I get up every day and get to be privileged to be in all these homes, whether they're $1 million or $100 million, is to me like nothing else I'd rather do.
Sure. I mean that's everything, right? I mean that's everything to wake up and to be excited about, tackling the day when your 2 feet hit the ground in the morning. Take me through what makes you tick. What drives you? What is something that you've accomplished so much in your career, and it seems like you're still hungry for so much more. What makes you tick?
Family.
Okay.
Um, what I like most about this business when I got involved initially was the fact that you do have flexibility in time. You make your own hours. You decide on how many listing appointments can you go on a week. I mean, we would go on 10 listing appointments a week, but I'd still find times to be there for my wife, having to be there for my kids, be at every ball game, whether football, basketball, hockey. They played every sport known to man. I was there for every doctor's appointment, every dentist appointment. I mean, I made the time because, again, as a real estate agent, you can be very flexible. But at the end of the day, you got to be there when your client calls you. So you set listing appointments. You certainly have those, but buyers can call at any given time, and you need to be there. And the guy who answers his phone the quickest, replies to his text message the fastest,
Hmm.
emails, etc., is the guy who's going to get the business because this is a business that's highly competitive. If you don't pick up your phone, somebody else will.
Hmm.
And if you don't reply to that text or email, someone else will. And if you reply rapidly, people appreciate it and they'll stay loyal to you.
Sure. And that loyalty grows from Long Island, right? We talked about Miami and California. Expand a little more on, now you're talking about, you're leaning into heavily the international market and what that looks like for you.
So the craziest story of all time, what it had to be from a TV show. Oh, I did a really incredible show that no one in the US has probably ever seen called The World's Most Luxurious. And it was on either the BBC or Channel 5 in the UK.
Hmm.
And it's syndicated all through Europe, right? Switzerland, Sweden, obviously London, Belgium, Amsterdam. It went through pretty much all of Eastern Europe. And it was a 1 hour show that was a series of 5 different shows. The World's Most Luxurious was about the world's most luxurious yachts,
Hmm.
the world's most luxurious resorts, the world's most luxurious planes, the world's most luxurious trains. I didn't even know they had luxury
Yeah.
trains in Europe.
Sure.
And the last episode was the world's most luxurious homes.
Hmm.
And of the 5 different episodes, the home one got the best ratings, and I was the host for 60 minutes, and I was able to take the audience through probably the nicest or the most incredible 5 or 6 homes in all of, let's say, the Platinum Triangle. That's Bel Air, Beverly Hills, Holmby Hills in California. And I've gotten a number of listings from this show. The one I'm talking about was a client in Saint Tropez
Mhm.
who's right now finishing $100 million property, and I represent them. I have the exclusive listing on that property through through our offices in Europe, and it's insane that that came from a TV show. That opportunity. I have another one. I have a listing in St. Bart's right now. One day I'm reading my emails, and Allison, who's here in my office right now, and I get an email and says, "Hi, my name is Duchess of this, or and Lord
Sure,
of that, and
sure, sure.
we're members of the House of Lords. We have several properties we want to sell." And it was Madam, and listed these properties. Isle of Man listed a property in the UK in London. Well, listed one in St. Bart's, and maybe one other one. And we're looking at this stuff, and she puts values on them: 18 million euro, 25 million euro, 50 million euro, 75 million euro. That's $90 million at the time, the way the euro was running. And I'm like, this can't be for real. I'm with Allison, and we Googled the person's name, and we realized that they're billionaires, House of Lords, and
Mhm.
they're one of the most prestigious families in all of the UK. Like, my God! And all she started her sentence was "Are you the guy from the TV show last night?"
Sure.
Hence, it led to a $55 million property in St. Bart's, which we still show from time to time. Coincidentally, we rented a couple Christmases ago, from Christmas to New Year's, to Jay Z and Beyonce.
Wow. Wow. You've touched on so much, you've traveled so much. Where is your favorite place that you could say you've been as far as real estate or culture and dining and things of that nature? Where do you find yourself I guess happiest when you travel?
So listen, I love New York. I'm a diehard New Yorker. I love Florida. It's never been a better place to be. Every hot restaurant from New York is now open in South Florida.
Mhm.
So if you love to eat like I do, you definitely have your choice of restaurants. And then California, I just love the topography. I mean, the weather's incredible. I just love it. It's going through some stress right now in their government. It'll be back in 5 years. I remember California as growing up, Venice Beach, you know, roller girl.
Sure.
I mean, girls rollerblading all over Venice Beach. White man can't jump.
Sure.
Muscle Beach. I mean, this was
Venice,
California.
Malibu.
And it's changed a lot, and it will change back. It's just a matter of time and government, and I'm excited about that. That's one of my favorite places in the world. I also love, again, like I said, I'm a diehard New Yorker, and I love Florida. But right now, I have to say it's the Côte d'Azur. It's the south of France, from like Nice, where you land, to Cannes, to Cap d'Ai, to Cap Ferrat, to Saint Tropez, to Monte Carlo, to to Monaco. There's nothing better. I absolutely love it, and I have a second listing there now for 118 million euro in a place called Cap d'Ai, which is 7 minutes out of Monaco. If you take a helicopter from the Nice airport to Monaco, which takes about 10 minutes, I can have you at the house in 7 more minutes, and it is 50-yard line between Cannes and Saint Tropez. So if you're at the Cannes Film Festival, or you're at the Formula One in Monaco, you're right there. And so that is my spot. I'm there for the Cannes Film Festival.
Sure.
2 weeks later for Formula One. I'm there for the yacht show in September. I what's better than Saint Tropez in the summer?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah, that was my next point is if you're an F1 guy, because I know that is certainly the hub of not only the automotive world, but also the luxury world. You're dealing with real estate, fashion, automobile, yacht, aircrafts, things of that nature. So that has your name all over it, Sean. Very, very, very impressive. And how your name is associated with luxury. That is a level of standard.
So back to what you were saying about Formula One and the Cannes Film Festival. So I go where my clients go. That's basically the bottom line. If you might remember a line from Entourage, if you were an Entourage fan.
Huge, huge fan.
So it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and Ari's at the top of the stairs, and he's wearing a suit, and under his suit, he has his pajamas on, and he's creeping down the stairs, working his way to the front door, and Mrs. Ari's at the front door and goes, "Where are you going, Ari?" And he goes, strip clubs, whorehouses. I go where my clients go.
Mhm.
The Playboy Mansion in this case.
Sure.
Mine's a little bit different. It's a higher level scale than that. But I'm in Cannes during the film festival. In fact, this year I'm hosting an event. I will be in Formula One hosting an event. I am at Davos in Switzerland at the World Wealth Conference hosting an event. I am at the Super Bowl. I am at the Formula One in Miami and the Formula One coming up in Dubai. This is what I do. I go where my clients go. And at the end of the day, that first trip to Shanghai, China, you know, you need to go where they go and again develop relationships and network. If you want to sell expensive houses, you need to have the network in order to be able to find those buyers. And I've spent a lot of time, a lot of blood, a lot of sweat, a lot of
Mhm.
tears, a lot of cash on being that guy. And again, being strategic, making sure I'm at the right places at the right time, on the expectation of, making a great clientele and developing amazing customers and clients.
Wow. Dubai, talk to me about that. What are your thoughts on Dubai?
So it's more like the Las Vegas of the Middle East. I don't know
Sure,
how much you know about
sure.
Dubai versus like going to Qatar or Abu Dhabi, or Saudi for
Mhm.
that matter. The real money is in Qatar. Saudi's got the most money. Um, Abu Dhabi. It's just that's the place where people go to play, and that's a great place for you to meet people. And the next trip that we have there will be the Formula One. It's not easy when you get there. In China, like again, I was there a dozen times over an 8-year period of time, and the first time I went with a friend of mine who also happened to be my accountant, and I trust him with my life, and I didn't know much about China. I've never been there, and I felt without knowing it, I didn't want to bring any agents who worked for my firm at the time, Shawn Elliott, because I felt like there's no loyalty in customers. In clients, you sign a contract to sell your house for a year at 6%, and they're your client for a year,
Mhm.
whether they like it or not. It's kind of how it works. And, I kill for my clients, but buyers necessarily don't necessarily have to work with anyone unless you
Mhm.
have a buyer broker agreement. We might hit that thing in July. I don't think it's going to happen. If it does, we're prepared. But
Right, I know that's coming.
it could be coming. We don't
Mhm.
really know yet. But if it comes, it comes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's not going to phase me one way or the other.
Mhm.
But when you're in China and you bring an agent from your firm, and today she's with your firm, tomorrow she's with another firm, you
Mhm.
don't really know. And I just felt uncomfortable bringing someone there and who spoke. I was already going to bring people who spoke Mandarin, right? And and then all of a sudden they meet a whale and they just forget about you, your firm, whether it's
Right.
Shawn Elliott or Nest Seekers, it doesn't matter. And but that was the first year. Second year, I did bring a team of two. By the third year, I was bringing 5 agents with me and hiring agents in mainland China who spoke perfect Mandarin and perfect English. I got two people. Actually, it was a husband and wife who went to Cornell, came to the States to study, became really successful in real estate, started building a real estate practice in Shanghai. We opened an office together on the Bund in Shanghai back in 2015. It was great until it was hard to get money out of China, and that ship sailed too. So you got to pivot, you got to move, you got
Mhm.
to you go where the money is, you go where you believe your audience is, and then if things change, you move with those changes.
Sure, and that actually brings me to my next point in question is, associating your name with real estate. Is there another industry or market that you're looking to get in or see yourself in, whether that be in the hospitality space as far as fine dining or, maybe an automotive dealership as far as car and automotive? I would
Great
imagine
question.
there's value to that,
It's a
so
great question because I've asked to do so many things. And I love focusing on one thing at a time. Like focusing on real estate is my jam. I love every minute of it. But let's work along, we'll call it the triangle. Things that associate themselves with ultra or uber luxury real estate
Mhm,
that we could work together. So I've always loved boats, so I love yachts, and I've had the privilege on being on a lot of yachts. In fact, this weekend I did secure a $120 million yacht in Palm Beach 3 days ago, for an event that I threw
mhm.
to thank my previous clients, my current clients, and who I hope to have as my future clients. Threw an event for 3 hours. It was a great night Saturday night, so much fun, and again, yachts. So if you're rich and you're really rich, there's a high likelihood that you don't only own one home, you own multiple homes.
Mhm.
you not only own a home, you probably own a yacht. And if you own a yacht, it's probably a big yacht. And if you have a big yacht, you need a plane because time is everything. The more money you have, less time you have. But at the same time, you want to get to your toys really quickly.
100%.
So if you're going to have a boat, whether it's in the Caribbean or the Mediterranean, you need that plane to get there. So at Nest Seekers, and this is something that I've been manifesting for the last 20 years,
Mhm.
and now with the help of Nest Seekers, we created this unbelievable experience. And it's actually not just a triangle, it's really more of a square. On the left hand corner, we have luxury properties, right? There's no firm that does it better than Nest Seekers and does it better than my team. And we're talking about, again, whether it's a million or 100 million, 200 million, we're your guys. Then comes that next one, I would say, is yachts,
Mhm.
right? So it basically the same guy owns an expensive home on Park Avenue or maybe on, uh, let's say, in the Hamptons,
Mhm.
or is going to have a yacht, right? And that same guy has the yacht, has a high likelihood he may have that plane.
Mhm.
And then if they're in the boats, they're into planes, they're into yachts. Going back to all the other original real estate brokers, they're into art.
Got
So
it.
they started with art. I don't even believe half the things that I hear from these firms that have these art house affiliations because I think they're just affiliations. And I've never seen a customer come out of like the art world. I don't want to mention the firm's names, but I've never seen a person who is an agent reach out to their art arm and say, "Hey, can you find me a buyer?" And if they did, they're just not connected, and it's just an affiliation, and it's just a way to secure the listing. It's not like that with us. We own our own yacht company,
Mhm.
Nest Yachts. We're a licensed yacht brokerage. We also own our own aviation company who charters and sells and buys planes, Nest Jets. And we also own our own art company as well. And these are legitimate sales. And this is a legitimate database by us, vertical. No one
Mhm.
else owns it, right?
Most
So
importantly, yeah,
yeah.
sure.
So we can leverage all of these assets to find the buyer for your, 10,
Mhm.
20, $50 million house. And other agencies don't necessarily have that. So if you're listening to this podcast and this is going to be a pitch and you're thinking about joining a firm who's truly vertical, who has no debt, who can move on a dime and pivot in any market, this is the best platform. That's why I am here. And that's why if you're listening to this podcast, you should be here.
Wow. Very cool. Shawn Elliott, I want to thank you so much for sharing your insight, your wisdom, your time today with us. This will conclude the Social Capital episode 008 with Mr. Shawn Elliott of Nest Seekers. So, Shawn, thank you so much for joining, and it was a pleasure. Hopefully, we'll find some time to get together in the future. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.